I'm Rebecca, 27 years old. The day I graduated with my master's in finance, my family didn't bother to show up. 3 days later, I learned my grandparents had left me their $1.2 million estate, and that's when everything unraveled. What should have been security turned into betrayal, forged papers, and even being shoved down a flight of stairs. But they never expected the truth. I had already moved everything into a trust they couldn't touch. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thank you for being here. 6 months ago, I was standing on the graduation stage at Northwestern University, holding my master's degree in finance, looking out at an auditorium filled with proud families cheering for their kids. Except mine wasn't there, not my dad, not my stepmom, and definitely not my stepbrother Tyler, who was probably passed out somewhere after another one of his legendary weekend binges. I should have been hurt, but honestly, I was relieved. Because for the first time in my life, I got to experience a major milestone without someone telling me I didn't deserve it or that Tyler needed something more important that day. See, my real mom died when I was 8 in a car accident. And 2 years later, my dad married Cheryl, who came with her 15-year-old son Tyler. From day one, it was crystal clear who the favorite was going to be. Tyler got the bigger bedroom, the new gaming console, the car for his 16th birthday. Me? I got a lecture about how money doesn't grow on trees, and if I wanted something, I'd better learn to work for it. By the time I was 16, I was working 25 hours a week at a local diner in Kenosha, Wisconsin, saving every penny for college while Tyler got his rent paid for his apartment near UW-Madison, where he was supposedly studying business, but mostly just partying. When I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA and got into Northwestern with partial scholarships, my dad's response was, "Good for you, honey, just don't expect us to help with the rest." So I didn't. I took out loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and spent 5 years getting my bachelor's and master's degrees, while Tyler dropped out junior year to find himself, and moved back home where Cheryl baby-fed him and my dad paid for his various failed business ventures. But here's what they didn't know, and what kept me sane through all those years of being treated like the unwanted stepchild. My grandparents on my mom's side, William and Margaret Chen, loved me unconditionally. Every summer since I was 10, I'd spend weeks at their beautiful lake house in northern Minnesota, helping Grandpa Bill with his woodworking projects and learning to cook from Grandma Maggie. They were the ones who actually showed up to my high school graduation. They were the ones who sent me care packages during finals week. They were the ones who believed in me when my own father couldn't be bothered. When I was in college, I started spending my winter breaks with them too, especially as they got older and needed more help. I was the one who took them to doctor's appointments, organized their medications, and made sure they were eating properly. My dad and Cheryl visited maybe twice a year, usually just long enough to take some photos for social media and complain about the drive. So when I got that call from their attorney, Thomas Richardson, 3 days after my graduation ceremony, I wasn't entirely surprised by what he told me, but I was definitely not prepared for what it would unleash. "Rebecca," he said in his gravelly voice, "your grandparents left you everything, the house, the investments, everything. We're looking at roughly $1.2 million total." I sat down hard in my tiny Chicago apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid student loan bills. Everything, everything. They were very specific. They said you were the only one who truly cared about them, not their money. Now, you might think this sounds like a fairy tale ending, right? Girl gets inheritance. Girl pays off loans. Girl lives happily ever after. But if you knew my family like I did, you'd understand why my very first thought wasn't gratitude or excitement. It was pure terror. Because I knew that the second my dad and Cheryl found out about this money, they would do everything in their power to get their hands on it. And I'd seen what they were capable of when money was involved. When I was 19, my Uncle Steve, my mom's brother, lent my dad $15,000 to expand his auto repair shop. 6 months later, the shop looked exactly the same. The money was gone. And every time Uncle Steve asked about it, my dad would either change the subject or Cheryl would start crying about how families shouldn't put money before relationships. When I was 22, they somehow got hold of my grandparents' checkbook during one of their visits and forged Grandma Maggie's signature on a $3,000 check. When I found out and confronted them, my dad told me I was being dramatic and that my grandparents had said they could borrow it. When I asked my grandparents directly, they had no idea what I was talking about. So yeah, I knew exactly what was coming the moment they found out about my inheritance. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That's when I made the smartest decision of my life. Instead of celebrating or telling anyone about the money, I called Northwestern's law clinic and asked for a referral to an estate planning attorney. 2 days later, I was sitting in the downtown Chicago office of Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in asset protection. "You want to set up an irrevocable trust before your family knows you've inherited anything," she said after I'd explained the situation. It wasn't a question. "Is that possible?" "Not only is it possible, it's smart. Once assets are in an irrevocable trust, they legally belong to the trust, not to you personally. That means even if someone somehow forced you to sign documents or sued you, they couldn't touch what's in the trust." We worked fast. Within 3 weeks, everything my grandparents had left me was transferred into the Chen Family Legacy Trust, with me as the sole trustee. The lake house title was transferred to an LLC owned by the trust. All bank accounts were closed and reopened under the trust name with two-factor authentication that only I could access. Every utility bill, insurance policy, and piece of property tax documentation was transferred to the trust's business address at Maria's law firm. I even had a discreet security system installed at the lake house, with cameras hidden around the property that I could monitor from my phone. Call it paranoia. But I wanted to know if anyone showed up there unexpectedly, and then I waited. For about 6 weeks, everything was quiet. I drove up to the lake house on weekends to maintain the property and just enjoy the peace of being somewhere my grandparents' memory felt alive. I didn't tell my dad about the inheritance. I didn't tell Cheryl. I definitely didn't tell Tyler. But I should have known that secret wouldn't last forever in a small town. It was a Thursday evening in late August when my phone rang, my dad's name on the screen. "Hey, honey," he said, and I could immediately hear the artificial warmth in his voice. "How are you doing? We haven't talked in a while." "I'm fine, Dad. Working a lot." I'd started a new job as a financial analyst at an investment firm in Chicago. "That's great, sweetheart. Listen, Cheryl and I were thinking, maybe it's time you came home for a visit. We could have a nice family dinner, catch up on everything." My stomach dropped. In 27 years, my dad had never called me sweetheart, and Cheryl had never wanted to catch up with me about anything. "That sounds nice, Dad, but I'm pretty busy with the new job and—" "Oh, I'm sure you can take one weekend off. Besides, we heard about Grandpa Bill and Grandma Maggie's house, and we thought you might need some help figuring out what to do with everything." There it was. "What did you hear exactly?" "Well, you know how small towns are. People talk. We heard they left you the house and maybe some other things. That's a big responsibility for someone your age, honey. Cheryl and I were thinking maybe we could help you manage everything. Make sure you don't get overwhelmed." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "I appreciate the concern, Dad, but I'm handling it fine." "Are you sure? Because maintaining a property like that is expensive, and we know you're still paying off student loans. Maybe we should all sit down and talk about the best way to handle this as a family." "I'll think about it." "Great. How about this weekend? We'll make your favorite dinner and—" I said I'll think about it, Dad. After I hung up, I immediately called Maria. "They know," I told her. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I think so. Remember, no matter what they say or do, you don't own those assets anymore. The trust does. You can't sign them away even if you wanted to." I thought I was ready. I really did. I had no idea what my family was actually capable of. 2 weeks later, they made their first real move. I was at the lake house on a Saturday morning, raking leaves in the crisp September air, when I heard the crunch of gravel in the driveway. My dad's truck pulled up, followed by Cheryl's SUV and a car I didn't recognize. Out stepped my dad, Cheryl, Tyler, and a man in an ill-fitting suit carrying a briefcase. "Surprise!" Cheryl called out with fake cheerfulness. "We thought we'd come up for the day and help you sort through some things." Tyler hung back by the cars, looking hungover and irritated. The man in the suit stepped forward and extended his hand. "Rebecca? I'm Bob Patterson, family attorney. Your parents asked me to help with some paperwork." I shook his hand, noticing immediately that his palm was sweaty and his handshake was weak. "What kind of paperwork?" My dad moved closer, his voice taking on that condescending tone I remembered from childhood. "Well, honey, we've been doing some research. And it turns out there might have been an error in your grandparents' will. What kind of error? Cheryl stepped forward, pulling a folder from her purse. When your grandmother updated the will after your grandfather passed, she accidentally left out some important language about family inheritance rights. Tyler should have been included as a beneficiary since he's been part of this family for 17 years. I stared at her. Tyler wasn't even close to my grandparents. That's not the point, my dad said sharply. The point is, legally, he has rights as a family member. Mr. Patterson here has prepared some documents that will correct the oversight and make sure everything is handled fairly. Bob Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. This is just a simple corrective agreement. It ensures that the inheritance is divided appropriately among all family members. Very standard stuff. I looked down at the papers. Even from a distance, I could see they were poorly formatted, clearly printed from someone's home computer. The legal seal at the bottom looked like it had been copy-pasted from a template. I need to review these with my own attorney before I sign anything. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice thick with irritation. Oh, come on, Becca. Don't be such a control freak. It's just paperwork. Tyler's right, Cheryl said. This is family. We don't need lawyers complicating things. My dad's expression hardened. Rebecca, I'm disappointed in you. Your grandparents would have wanted us to handle this together, as a family. They wouldn't have wanted you to be greedy. The word greedy hit me like a slap. Here I was, having spent years caring for my grandparents while they ignored them, and I was being called greedy for wanting to honor their wishes. I'm not being greedy, Dad. I'm being careful. If these documents are legitimate, then my attorney can review them. And your attorney? Cheryl's voice went shrill. What do you need an attorney for? We're your family. Which is exactly why I need an attorney. The temperature in the air seemed to drop. Bob Patterson cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we could schedule another time when Rebecca has had a chance to— No, my dad cut him off. We're handling this today. That's when I knew for certain that this was all fake. A real attorney would never pressure someone to sign documents without legal review. A real attorney would encourage getting independent counsel. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling my lawyer right now. Tyler stepped forward aggressively. Put the phone down, Becca. Excuse me? You heard me. Stop being such a spoiled brat and just sign the papers. Tyler, back off. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own family? The situation was escalating fast. Bob Patterson was looking increasingly uncomfortable, probably realizing he was in way over his head. Cheryl was getting that red-faced look she got when she was about to explode. My dad was staring at me with an expression of cold disappointment I'd seen too many times before. I want all of you to leave, I said quietly. We're not leaving until this gets sorted out, my dad said. Then I'm calling the police. That's when Cheryl completely lost it. You ungrateful little bitch, she screamed. After everything we've done for you, after we raised you when your own mother couldn't be bothered to stick around. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother had died in a car accident. She hadn't chosen to leave. Don't you dare talk about my mother like that. I'll talk about her however I want. We gave you a home, we fed you, we put up with your attitude for years. And this is how you repay us? By stealing money that should belong to the whole family? I started to respond, but Tyler stepped between us, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. You know what, Becca? I'm sick of your princess act. Sign the fucking papers. Get away from me, Tyler. He grabbed my arm. Sign them. Let go of me. I tried to pull away, but Tyler's grip tightened. That's when everything went wrong. As I jerked backward to get away from him, Tyler lost his balance and stumbled into me. Whether he meant to or not, his hands shoved hard against my shoulders, sending me tumbling backward toward the porch steps. I fell hard, my back hitting the wooden steps, my head snapping back against the railing. Pain shot through my spine and shoulder as I landed in a crumpled heap at the bottom of the 3-step porch. For a moment, everything was silent except for the sound of my own gasping breath. Then Cheryl started screaming. Oh my God, Tyler, what did you do? My dad rushed over, but not to help me. To check on Tyler, who was standing there looking shocked and pale. I didn't mean to, Tyler mumbled. She was pulling away and I didn't mean to push her that hard. I struggled to sit up, my shoulders screaming in pain. Get off my property. Honey, are you okay? My dad asked, finally looking at me. Get off my property. Bob Patterson was already backing toward his car. I think maybe we should. Yeah, you should go, I said, pulling myself to my feet with the help of the porch railing. And take your fake documents with you. They're not fake, Cheryl protested. Really? Then I'm sure my attorney will be very interested in reviewing them, along with the video footage from my security cameras that just recorded Tyler assaulting me. The color drained from all of their faces. You have cameras? My dad asked. I have cameras. I have recordings of this entire conversation, and I have witnesses. I gestured toward the lake, where I could see my neighbor Mrs. Peterson standing on her dock, clearly having heard the commotion. Tyler looked like he was going to be sick. Becca, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You meant it. You all meant it. You came here with forged documents planning to steal my inheritance, and when I wouldn't cooperate, you got violent. Now wait just a minute, my dad started. No, you wait. This is my property, my inheritance, my decision. And my decision is that all of you need to leave right now, or I'm calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing and assault. Bob Patterson was already in his car. Tyler was backing toward the SUV, but my dad stood his ground. Rebecca, you're making a mistake. Family is all we have in this world. You're right, Dad. Family is all we have. Too bad I found out today that you're not my family. As they drove away, I sank down onto the porch steps, adrenaline making my hands shake as I called Maria. They came with forged documents, I told her, and Tyler pushed me down the stairs. Are you hurt? I think I'm okay. Bruised up, but okay. Do you have it on camera? Everything. Good. We're going on the offensive. Within 48 hours, Maria had filed a police report for assault, contacted the State Bar Association about Bob Patterson's fraudulent legal practice, and sent cease and desist letters to my dad, Cheryl, and Tyler. She also had the forged documents analyzed by a handwriting expert and discovered that the notary seal was completely fake. The number didn't exist in Wisconsin's notary database. But that was just the beginning. When the police investigated Bob Patterson, they discovered he wasn't a lawyer at all. He was a plumber who'd lost his license 2 years earlier for fraud and had been working odd jobs ever since. My dad had paid him $500 to pretend to be an attorney and bring fake documents. The documents themselves were even worse than I'd thought. Not only were they forged, but Tyler had actually signed my grandfather's name on them. Even though my grandfather had been dead for over 2 years, the signature analysis proved it was Tyler's handwriting, which meant he could be charged with identity theft and fraud in addition to the assault. But the biggest bombshell came when Maria's investigator dug deeper into my family's finances. Remember that $15,000 my dad had borrowed from Uncle Steve? He'd never paid it back because he'd gambled it away at the casino. The $3,000 he'd stolen from my grandparents, that had gone to pay off Tyler's DUI lawyer, and Tyler's various business ventures that my dad had funded. They were all fake. Tyler had been using the money to buy drugs, which he'd been selling to kids at the local high school. When all of this came out, the ripple effects were immediate and devastating. Tyler was arrested on multiple charges: assault, fraud, identity theft, and drug trafficking. The police found his entire operation when they searched his room. Scales, baggies, and enough marijuana and pills to put him away for years. My dad's auto shop was investigated for tax evasion and money laundering, and they found years of unreported income and suspicious cash transactions. The IRS froze his assets while they conducted their investigation. Cheryl lost her job as a substitute teacher when the school district found out about her involvement in the fraudulent legal documents and her connection to Tyler's drug dealing. And Bob Patterson? He was charged with impersonating an attorney, fraud, and conspiracy. Within 6 months, my entire family was either in jail, under investigation, or financially ruined. You might think I'd feel bad about it. You might think I'd feel guilty for destroying their lives. But here's the thing. I didn't destroy their lives. I just stopped participating in the cover-up of their own self-destruction. The gambling addiction, the theft, the drug dealing, the fraud. I didn't create any of that. They did. All I did was refuse to be their next victim and make sure there were consequences for their actions. And you know what? For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. I moved permanently to the lake house and started working remotely for my investment firm. I set up a small office in what used to be my grandmother's sewing room. with a view of the lake where I could watch the sunrise every morning over my coffee. I used some of the trust assets to renovate the house, updating the kitchen and bathrooms while keeping all the character that made it special. I planted a garden where my grandmother's used to be and learned to cook her recipes from the handwritten cards I found in her kitchen drawer. Most importantly, I started therapy to work through years of emotional abuse and manipulation. I learned to recognize gaslighting, to trust my own instincts, and to understand that cutting toxic people out of your life isn't cruel. It's necessary for survival. About 8 months after everything went down, I got a letter from my dad. He was facing serious jail time for tax evasion and wanted me to know that he was sorry for any misunderstandings and hoped we could work things out as a family. I read it once and threw it away. Tyler wrote to me from county jail, asking for money for his legal defense and promising had changed. I didn't even open the envelope. I returned it to sender. Cheryl tried calling me multiple times from different numbers, leaving voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart and how she'd always loved me like her own daughter. I blocked every number and changed my own. Because here's what I learned through all of this. When people show you who they really are, believe them. When someone's love comes with conditions and manipulation, it's not love at all. And when protecting yourself means disappointing people who never truly cared about your well-being anyway, that's not a loss, it's a victory. I'm 38 now, I've been living in my grandparents' house for almost 2 years, and I've never been happier or more at peace. I met someone, a wonderful man named David, who's a local veterinarian. And we're talking about getting married next summer in the garden behind the house. I still work in finance, but now I also volunteer with a local nonprofit that helps people escape abusive family situations. I tell them my story as proof that it's possible to break free, to build a life based on your own values instead of other people's manipulation. Sometimes people ask me if I ever miss my family. The answer is no. I miss the family I thought I had, the family I wanted them to be. But I don't miss the constant walking on eggshells, the guilt trips, the feeling like nothing I did would ever be enough. What I have now is something I never had before. Peace. The kind of deep, settled peace that comes from knowing you're safe, you're valued, and you're exactly where you belong. My grandparents left me more than money and property. They left me an example of what real love looks like: consistent, unconditional, and protective. They showed me that I deserved better than what I was accepting, and they gave me the tools to create a better life. The trust fund wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about protecting myself, my future, and my right to live without fear or manipulation. To anyone listening to this who might be in a similar situation, whether it's about money, relationships, or just feeling like you're never good enough for your own family, I want you to know that you have the power to change your story. You have the right to protect yourself, even from people who share your DNA. You have the right to demand respect, to set boundaries, and to walk away from situations that damage your spirit. It's not easy, it's scary as hell, and there will be people who try to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself over their dysfunction. But on the other side of that fear is a life where you get to decide what love looks like, where your worth isn't up for debate, and where you can finally breathe without wondering when the next crisis is coming. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Get professional help. And remember, you don't owe anyone access to your life, your resources, or your energy, no matter what they call themselves or how long you've known them. Take it from someone who learned the hard way. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling people to hurt you. And sometimes the family you choose is so much better than the family you were given. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life? How did you find the strength to do it? What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with a similar situation? Remember to like this video if it helped you feel less alone, and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama, protecting yourself legally, and building the life you actually want. Until next time, keep choosing yourself. You deserve nothing less. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly what happened in the weeks and months that followed, because the legal fallout was just the beginning of how this whole situation completely imploded. The day after Tyler pushed me down those stairs, I drove straight to the emergency room to get checked out and document my injuries. The doctor found bruising on my back and shoulder, a mild concussion, and strained ligaments in my neck. More importantly, he took detailed photos and wrote up a comprehensive medical report that Maria immediately added to our legal file. While I was at the hospital, Maria was busy destroying my family's entire scam operation. The first domino to fall was Bob Patterson. When the police showed up at his apartment with a warrant, they found dozens of fake legal documents he'd created for other clients, mostly people trying to steal inheritances, forge property deeds, or create fraudulent wills. His computer was full of legal templates he'd downloaded from sketchy websites and modified with fake letterheads and forged notary seals. Turns out, my family wasn't his first rodeo. Bob had been running this fake lawyer scheme for almost 3 years, charging desperate people hundreds of dollars to create official-looking documents that wouldn't hold up for 5 minutes in real court. The state attorney general's office estimated he'd defrauded over 50 families across Wisconsin and Minnesota. When they arrested him, Bob immediately rolled over on my dad and Cheryl, telling investigators that they'd contacted him specifically because they'd heard he could make inheritance problems go away for the right price. He had recordings of their phone conversations, where my dad explicitly asked for documents that would convince Rebecca to share the money with Tyler. That's when I realized this whole thing had been planned for months. They hadn't just stumbled into this scheme. They'd actively sought out someone to help them steal from me. The recordings were devastating. In one call, Cheryl said, "Rebecca's always been too trusting. If the papers look official enough, she'll probably just sign them." In another, my dad said, "She won't want to cause a scene in front of the family. She's always been a people pleaser." Hearing those recordings was like getting punched in the stomach all over again. They'd studied my personality, identified my weaknesses, and planned to exploit them to steal everything my grandparents had left me. But the worst part? In one of the final recordings, Tyler could be heard in the background saying, "If she doesn't sign, we'll just make her sign. She's not exactly going to fight back." That recording became key evidence in Tyler's assault case. While the criminal investigations were ramping up, Maria and I weren't sitting idle. We filed a civil lawsuit against all 4 of them, my dad, Cheryl, Tyler, and Bob Patterson, for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, emotional distress, and assault. We also filed complaints with every relevant professional board and government agency we could think of. The results were swift and brutal. Within 2 weeks, the IRS had frozen my dad's business accounts and was conducting a full audit of his auto shop. Apparently, the investigators found some very interesting discrepancies in his tax filings, going back 7 years. Cash transactions that weren't reported, employee wages that didn't match payroll records, and mysterious business expenses that looked a lot like personal purchases. My dad had always bragged about how smart he was for keeping the government out of his business. Turns out, the government doesn't like being kept out of businesses, especially when those businesses owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid taxes. Cheryl's situation was almost as bad. The school district didn't just fire her. They reported her to the state education board for conduct unbecoming of an educator. Apparently, being involved in a conspiracy to commit fraud and document forgery doesn't look good on a teacher's permanent record. She was banned from working in any Wisconsin school district, which meant her entire career was over. But Tyler's life completely fell apart. When the police searched his room at my dad's house, they found what looked like a small-scale drug distribution operation. Scales, plastic baggies, a notebook with names and dollar amounts, and enough marijuana, cocaine, and prescription pills to supply half the high school. The drug charges alone were serious enough to put him away for years, but it got worse when investigators started following the money trail. Turns out, Tyler hadn't just been selling drugs to kids. He'd been selling them to other dealers and using my dad's auto shop as a money laundering operation. Those mysterious cash transactions the IRS found. A lot of them were Tyler's drug money being run through the business books as part sales and labor charges. My dad had been helping Tyler wash drug money for months, probably without even realizing how serious the federal crimes they were committing. When the DEA got involved, everything escalated to a whole new level. They seized my dad's shop, his house, all of his vehicles, and every bank account connected to the business. Cheryl lost her car, her jewelry, and her retirement savings. Tyler was looking at federal drug trafficking charges that carried a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. And through all of this chaos, I was sitting in my peaceful lake house, completely protected by the trust I'd set up months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they were plotting to steal my inheritance, I was making sure they could never touch it. While they were committing crimes to get their hands on my money, I was following the law and protecting myself. While they were destroying their own lives through greed and stupidity, I was building a new life based on honesty and self-respect. But the legal victories were only part of my healing process. The emotional work was much harder. I'd grown up believing that family meant everything, that you stick together no matter what, that blood is thicker than water. Realizing that my own family had spent months planning to steal from me, manipulate me, and physically intimidate me if necessary, that shattered something fundamental in my worldview. I started therapy with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma and abuse. Those first few sessions were brutal. I'd never really allowed myself to acknowledge how dysfunctional my family was, because I'd been so focused on surviving it. Rebecca, Dr. Walsh said during one of our early meetings, you've been trained from childhood to prioritize everyone else's needs over your own. Your stepmother needed you to be less important than Tyler, so you made yourself smaller. Your father needed you to be independent so he could focus on Tyler, so you learned to never ask for help. They've conditioned you to believe that your value comes from how useful you are to other people. That hit me like a lightning bolt. I'd spent my entire adult life proving my worth through achievements, work, and taking care of others. I'd never learned to value myself just for existing. The inheritance issue isn't really about money, Dr. Walsh continued. It's about your right to be valued, to be protected, to have your needs matter as much as anyone else's. When you set up that trust, you weren't just protecting assets, you were finally protecting yourself. Those therapy sessions helped me understand that what happened with my family wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the culmination of years of subtle abuse and manipulation. The inheritance just brought their true feelings about me into the open. I also started attending a support group for people who'd gone no contact with toxic family members. Hearing other people's stories made me realize how common my experience was. There was Sarah, whose parents had stolen her identity to open credit cards. There was Mike, whose brother had forged his signature to get access to their grandmother's life insurance. There was Linda, whose entire extended family had ganged up on her when she refused to give them money from her divorce settlement. The hardest part isn't cutting them off, Sarah told the group one evening. It's dealing with everyone who tells you that family is family and you should forgive them. People who've never lived with this kind of abuse don't understand that forgiveness doesn't mean you have to keep letting people hurt you. That support group became my lifeline during the darkest months of the legal proceedings. When I started doubting myself, when I wondered if I was being too harsh, when I felt guilty for destroying my family, those people reminded me that I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped participating in my own destruction. Meanwhile, the criminal cases were moving forward with devastating efficiency. Bob Patterson pled guilty to fraud and impersonating an attorney in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 3 years in prison and had to pay restitution to all of his victims. During his sentencing hearing, he actually had the nerve to say that he'd been trying to help families resolve disputes and didn't realize he was doing anything seriously wrong. Tyler's case was more complicated because of the drug trafficking charges. His public defender tried to argue that he was just a small-time dealer, not a serious criminal. But when federal prosecutors showed the judge evidence of Tyler's distribution network, his money laundering operation, and the sheer volume of drugs he'd been moving, that argument fell apart. Tyler ended up pleading guilty to drug trafficking, money laundering, assault, and multiple fraud charges. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 8 years. My dad's tax evasion case took longer to resolve, but the outcome was just as severe. The IRS determined that he owed over $400,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. Since he'd been laundering Tyler's drug money through the business, he was also charged with conspiracy and money laundering. He lost everything. The auto shop was sold to pay his tax debt. The house was foreclosed on. His retirement savings were seized. At 62 years old, my dad went from being a small business owner to a convicted felon facing 5 years in federal prison. Cheryl tried to claim she was an innocent victim who didn't know what her husband and son were doing. But the recordings Bob Patterson had made proved that she'd been actively involved in planning the inheritance scam from the beginning. She pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges and got 2 years in prison plus 5 years probation. The whole thing took about 18 months from start to finish. By the time all the sentencing was done, my entire former family was either in prison or completely financially ruined. You might expect me to feel vindicated or satisfied by their downfall. Mostly, I just felt exhausted. But I also felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete freedom from their drama, their manipulation, and their constant chaos. For the first time in my life, I could make decisions based on what I wanted, not what would keep other people happy. I could spend my money on things that mattered to me, not on bailing them out of their latest crisis. I could build relationships with people who actually cared about my well-being, not just what I could do for them. And that's when I met David. I was at the local farmer's market on a Saturday morning, buying fresh vegetables for the garden salads I'd become obsessed with making. I was loading tomatoes into my basket when I heard someone behind me say, "Those are from the Peterson farm, right? They have the best tomatoes in 3 counties." I turned around to see a tall man with kind eyes and dirt under his fingernails, holding a basket full of the same tomatoes. "Are you a gardening expert?" I asked. He laughed. "Not exactly. I'm a veterinarian, but I spend a lot of time at farms around here. I'm David Chen, by the way." "Rebecca Hayes. And wait, Chen? Are you related to William and Margaret Chen?" His face lit up. "Those were my great-aunt and great-uncle. You must be Rebecca, the granddaughter they were always talking about. They absolutely adored you." That chance meeting turned into coffee, which turned into dinner, which turned into long walks around the lake, where David would tell me stories about my grandparents that I'd never heard before. "Uncle Bill used to say you were the only one in the family who inherited Aunt Margaret's common sense," David told me one evening as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. "He was so proud of how you took care of them in their final years. I loved them. They were the only family I had who actually acted like family." Well, now you know why. Uncle Bill always said blood doesn't make you family, love and respect make you family. David and I took things slowly. After everything I'd been through with my biological family, I was cautious about trusting anyone new. But David was patient, consistent, and genuinely interested in who I was as a person, not what I could do for him. He never asked about my inheritance or made comments about how lucky I was to have money. He never pushed for information about the legal cases or tried to give me advice about my family situation. He just showed up consistently and kindly and let me set the pace for everything. 6 months after we met, David asked if I'd like to go with him to his family's Christmas gathering. "I should probably warn you," he said. "My family is pretty normal. No drama, no hidden agendas. No one's going to try to steal your purse or manipulate you into anything. It might be weird for you." He was joking, but he was also right. David's family was so healthy and functional that I almost didn't know how to act around them. They asked about my job because they were genuinely interested, not because they were fishing for information about my income. They included me in conversations without making me feel like I had to prove I belonged there. They respected my boundaries when I said I didn't want to talk about certain topics. It was like visiting an alien planet where people actually liked each other. "Is this how normal families work?" I asked David on the drive home. "Pretty much. No one's perfect, but we've all agreed that treating each other with basic respect makes everything easier." What a concept. That Christmas was the first holiday I'd enjoyed in years. No walking on eggshells, no family drama, no one asking me for money or making passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. Just good food, silly games, and people who were genuinely happy to see each other. It made me realize how much energy I'd been wasting for years, trying to manage other people's emotions and prevent conflicts that were never my responsibility to prevent. A year and a half after we met, David proposed to me on the same dock, where my grandparents used to sit and watch the sunrise together. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, and he'd asked his family's permission to give it to me. "I want you to know," he said as he got down on one knee, "that I'm not just asking you to marry me, I'm asking you to be part of a family that will value you and protect you and celebrate you for exactly who you are." I said yes before he even finished the question. We got married the following summer in the garden behind the lake house, surrounded by David's family and the friends I'd made since moving to Minnesota. It was a small ceremony, maybe 40 people total, but it was perfect. During the reception, David's father stood up to make a toast. "Rebecca," he said, "when David first told us about you, he said you were the strongest person he'd ever met. But what I've learned about you over the past 2 years is that your strength doesn't come from being tough or hardened by life. It comes from your willingness to keep your heart open even after people have tried to break it. It comes from your ability to choose love and kindness even when you haven't always received those things in return. Welcome to the family. We're honored to have you." I cried through the entire toast, but for the first time in my life, they were tears of joy instead of pain. Now, 3 years after my fake family imploded, and 2 years after I married into a real one, I can honestly say that losing those toxic relationships was the best thing that ever happened to me. My life is quieter now, but it's also infinitely richer. I wake up every morning in a house filled with love and memories of people who actually cared about me. I work a job I enjoy without the constant stress of wondering which family member is going to call with their latest crisis. I have a husband who supports my dreams and an extended family who treats me like I actually belong. I've also become passionate about helping other people escape similar situations. I volunteer with a local nonprofit that provides legal assistance to people dealing with financial abuse from family members. I've helped dozens of people set up trusts, document abuse, and navigate the legal system to protect themselves from relatives who see them as piggy banks instead of people. Just last month, I worked with a young woman whose parents were trying to steal her college fund to pay for her brother's gambling debts. We were able to get her money into a protected account and get her parents charged with attempted fraud before they could take a single penny. "How did you know what to do?" she asked me after her case was resolved. "Because I've been where you are," I told her. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable people to keep hurting you. That conversation reminded me why I wanted to share my story publicly. There are so many people out there who are dealing with toxic family members and feeling guilty about protecting themselves. There are so many people who've been conditioned to believe that family loyalty means accepting abuse, that love means sacrificing your own well-being for other people's comfort. I want those people to know that it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to walk away from relationships that damage your spirit, even if those relationships are with people who share your DNA. The trust fund wasn't just about protecting money. It was about protecting my right to live free from manipulation and abuse. Setting up that legal protection was the first step in learning to protect myself emotionally too.